And there's nothing that strikes at the core of families more than when the government interferes with parental rights. Last week, after contentious debate, Governor Hogan allowed a bill to let minors as young as 12 years old to seek mental and emotional health care without their parents' or guardians' consent come into law. Phil, opponents felt that parents would be uninformed about their child's care and what they're going through. Why are were these concerns dismissed by the General Assembly?
You know, that's a great question, Casey. I'm not entirely sure because obviously I don't have a insight into what the entire General Assembly was thinking, but I will say, as someone who believes in parental notification for just about everything, I can certainly see why someone, might embrace the idea. Because with some of these, it may be very difficult for young people who understand that they're struggling with something to, go to their parents and say, hey, look, this is a problem. I know, family I grew up in, if I said I wanted to see a psychiatrist, psychologist, the response would not have been, okay, well, let's go do that. It would have been, quite a bit more harsh than that. So I can certainly understand what the rationale is, although I don't think we should ever get away from having parental involvement because the parents are the best help for the child.
Well, I guess, Mike, that's where do we strike the balance? I mean, isn't there a concern that young people might be unduly influenced by healthcare professionals in decisions that their parents might oppose? I mean, if we're going to allow the minor to receive guidance from healthcare professionals, when do we involve the parents into that decision-making process?
I think it's a really good question as well, and I think it's an interesting challenge or an interesting opportunity. And I think I was intrigued by the fact that Governor Hogan's response was looking at how do you provide access to children to be able to have those conversations in a situation where the parent likely will be opposed to it, because we know that our children right now, especially coming out of COVID, or many more are dealing with depression and all sorts of other issues. And the challenge becomes, how do they have a conversation? How do they be able to engage someone to help them with that, especially when they're in an environment where that would be looked down upon? And yet, how do we make sure that there is a supportive environment for them once they actually start to recognize how to address this issue? And it's a really difficult challenge.
Well, we make our parents responsible for our children. Well, even though the age majority may be 18, the fact is parents are generally responsible for their children, for years and years after they reach the age of majority. If a child wants to make a decision that runs contrary to the parents' beliefs and what they might think is the healthy decision for their child, is government going to step in and prevent the parents from having their input on that?
It's a really good question, and it'll be interesting to see how it gets to that level, because I think what you'll see in most cases is in a situation, whether it's in a summer camp or in a school environment, where you have a student that recognizes that they have somebody that they can approach and ask, how do I think about this? How do I address this differently? If that's the case and it helps them to process a situation in a way that's more productive and healthier than they would have otherwise, in some instances, the parent may never even know that occurred. And if it helps that student because they could have a conversation they wouldn't have had, at the end of the day, that's a better thing. The challenge becomes, I think, when does that tension and when do those two elements clash? When does that parent engage and say, why did this conversation occur, and how does that come up?
Yeah, the scary part is I halfway agree with Mike.
This affects everyone. Because we've had parents that oppose their children being vaccinated, not just for COVID, but for other vaccinations, and still those decisions get overrun by government.
Right. Yeah, and that's really the crux of this, because what I don't want to do is set any kind of precedent, because, for example, abortion is big. Do you want to make it possible for your child to go and have an abortion without telling them? No. Do you want them to get vaccinated or receive some kind of drugs without you knowing about it? No. But, again, something different where child struggling with something, they don't really know who to turn to. They think they can. And a lot of cases is we think about with just our friends and family, sometimes going to that person who's outside of that circle will be helpful for that. And so that's why this might be a little bit of a special situation. But again, I also want to reiterate, I don't want to take the parents out of the equation. I don't want them to be totally uninvolved here. But I see the rationale.
Mike, any last thoughts?
No, I just think I want to make this note now that Phil and I are actually on the same page, because I'm thinking it's the first and last time in this program that it'll occur, and likely in future programs.
3:26 p.m.
Never say never, Mike. I mean, you didn't expect that when we started this discussion. So when we come back from this short break, in the post-George Floyd era, can they do acts of policing? Stay tuned.